Let's get started with today's lesson. The first defense mechanism I want to talk about is denial. And this happens primarily in the healthcare setting when the patient is dealing with a new diagnosis or an immediate crisis, right? You come in and you tell them their new diagnosis, or you tell them that their loved one passed away on the operating table, or whatever the case may be. And what is their first reaction? Oh my God, no way, something like that. So one of the defense mechanisms is denial. And don't forget too, when teaching your client or when giving them the bad news, that denial is the first step in the grieving process. So we have to allow for denial while not letting our patient get delusional, right? So, number one, denial. The second defense mechanism I want to talk about is repression, not to be confused with regression. That's why I put the P red, repression. Okay, what is repression? Repression is employed by the ego to keep unconscious thoughts from becoming a conscious reality. All right. When do we do repression the most? You might see this when a person is under the influence, right, of drugs or alcohol, or perhaps demented. This is when you might see this in the healthcare field. This is the only time you would see this type of repression used as a mechanism in the healthcare field. Okay? Now, let's talk about regression. What is regression? The next term that we want to talk about is regression. Now, you won't see this very much in the healthcare field as a nurse, so therefore it probably won't be on the NCLEX, but we still need to learn it, right? And that is regression. What is regression? Well, when some people feel threatened or anxious, they may unconsciously escape to an earlier stage of development, right? Children may start to suck their thumbs again. Adults may sleep with stuffed animals or eat comforting food, things like this. So all this simply means is when the person is dealing with a crisis, they revert to an earlier stage in their childhood where they found comfort as a child. All right? All right, now let's talk about suppression. All these kind of sound the same. Repression, suppression, regression. This is why I'm talking about these three things. They kind of sound the same. I don't want you to confuse them. So with suppression, that is the ego choosing not to feel or remember the negative experience at all, right? We suppress it. We forget about it. But with the reaction formation, the person uses this defense mechanism to recognize how they feel, but they choose to behave in the opposite manner of their instincts. All right? You might come tell a family member devastating news, so instead of crying, they laugh, right? Well, maybe, just maybe, they're using a reaction formation. They're recognizing the sorrow that they feel, but in that moment, they crack a joke about their uncle and what their uncle used to say, right? They react in a manner opposite of how they really feel. That is reaction formation. They acknowledge their feeling, but act in a opposite manner of their instinct. Okay? Okay, so moving right along, the next defense mechanism that I want to talk about is projection. Now, we do see this an awful lot in the healthcare field. What is projection as it pertains to the NCLEX or as it pertains to your medical professional life? Projection is when a person has thoughts or feelings about themselves, but they say you have those thoughts or feelings. They say you have that problem, right? So let's read it on the screen right here. It says, some thoughts and feelings you have about another person may make you feel uncomfortable, meaning the patient, right? If the patient projects those feelings, then the patient is misattributing them to the other person. You see that a lot in therapeutic communication questions for the NCLEX. The NCLEX will often ask, how do you respond? Now remember, with therapeutic communication, we don't want to ask why questions. You ask what, how, when, and where, but never why. You want to keep the conversation with your client, with your patient, open-ended. You want it to be a two-way street, right? So never ask a why question for the NCLEX, because if you ask a why question and the client goes, I don't know, well, then guess what, ladies and gentlemen? That's the end of the conversation, right? So remember that for the NCLEX. The sixth defense mechanism we're going to talk about, or really the seventh, because I did talk about suppression, but I only glanced over it. But, so for the sake of this presentation, this is the sixth, right? We should be on number 6, is displacement. What is displacement? Displacement is strong, direct emotions and frustrations directed towards a person or an object that isn't threatened, right? This allows the person to satisfy the urge to react without, heavy consequences, right? Let's say your husband or your partner yells at you, all right? You're upset about your partner or your neighbor or your whoever it is yelling at you. So next thing you know, the dog comes in and barks at you. So you snap at the dog. Are you really mad at the dog? No. You're mad at the person that yelled at you. But the dog is safe. The dog's not going to snap your head off if you yell at the dog, right? So you yell at the dog because the dog is safe. And this happens frequently with your patient, right? Therapeutic communication. You walk in and all of a sudden they snap about the food and how terrible the food is. When in actuality, they're really scared about the surgery they're going to have. It's not really about how terrible the food is, right? It's about their surgery and they're scared about it. So, and this happens quite frequently. So, sit in the chair and talk to Mrs. Smith. Say, Mrs. Smith, what is it that's frustrating you today? Don't be confrontational. Don't say, why are you yelling about the food? Don't do it like that. What is it that's frustrating you today? Or, I can see you're frustrated. What can I do to help? Something like this, This becomes very important with therapeutic communication and the NCLEX. So this is number 6, displacement. The 7th defense mechanism is extremely easy. It happens all the time. Rationalization, right? We attempt to explain our behavior with our perceived facts, right? Rationalization is really self-explanatory. And again, this allows them to feel comfortable with the choices they've made, even if they know on another level it's not right. Right? That's rationalization. Okay, the eighth type of defense mechanism is something that I do a lot. Okay, this type of defense mechanism is when a person has a bad experience, but they turn it around and make something positive out of it. This is called sublimation, right? When you have a bad experience and you turn that bad experience around and do something good for people. Like, for example, myself. I failed the NCLEX back in 1996. I failed it 2 times. And back in those days, you had to wait 3 months to take the exam. Now you only have to wait a month and a half. So, I mean, I took 9 months to become a nurse after graduation because I failed the NCLEX. But did I feel sorry for myself? Yes, I did, actually. I had to go through the stages of grieving because it was a terrible, terrible, terrible letdown. I was physically sick, emotionally unwell. It was a terrible ordeal for me. But what did I do? I started helping other people pass the NCLEX. And I've been doing this ever since 1997. I took a bad thing and made something positive out of it. That's called sublimation. And that's something that we all should do more of. And many, many, many of us in the nursing field does do this. So when your patient, let's say your patient finds out that their mother's going to die or something like that, and she starts helping more in the church. She doesn't seem to be upset, whatever the case may be. This is actually a good activity, right? It's a good thing for our patient to do. So don't discourage this. This does not, the sublimation, please don't confuse that with denial, right? So before you think a patient is in denial and just ignoring the problem, make sure it's not sublimation. Sublimation is a positive, good activity. All right. Okay, now this one is a good one too. Compartmentalization. What that means is the person is so overwhelmed that they take their life, or they take the crisis and break it down into small compartments of their life that they can handle. You are doing it right now as you're studying for the NCLEX. You're going to work. That's one compartment. Your family, that's another compartment. Friends, you're making time for work, family, friends, studying. You're compartmentalizing, right? You have a lot on your plate right now. So you're making small little areas in your life and tackling them one at a time. That's what compartmentalization is. Tackling a crisis one small bite at a time. We will tackle the entire crisis, but we are breaking it up into manageable, chewable small baby bites. Does that make sense? All right, that's what compartmentalization is. And the last defense mechanism, number 10, that I want to talk about for the NCLEX is intellectualization. Now, we in the medical field do this a lot. So if we do this a lot, you can be rest assured that your clients may do this a lot. But this is where, when hit with a trying situation, the individual may remove all emotions from their responses, and they just instead focus on quantitative facts, right? No emotion. Now, be careful not to be judgmental with this defense mechanism, because oftentimes we say, oh, the client's affect was inappropriate, all right? be careful not to do that, right? This is called intellectualization, where the person takes all feelings out of it and focus on quantitative facts. Why? So that they don't cry, right? Now, they may cry later, but not now, right? So I just told you these 10 defense mechanisms. There's other defense mechanisms, but I just focused on what may or may not be on the NCLEX. And listen, even if this isn't on the NCLEX, all right, I know a few of them will be. I put this presentation together because it's important for you to know as you go forth and conquer the world in your nursing career, as you go forth and help other people, right? It's important to understand defense mechanisms with therapeutic communication. So I hope that this helped you, not just for the NCLEX, but for your career. All right? So there you have it, and I'll see you in the next video. Study hard. God bless. I'm getting ready to tutor someone at 3 o'clock, so let's do this. Take care, guys. See you in the next video.